JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 7 Steel Ball Run is honestly one of the best manga I have read in the last year. I am not caught up to it, and this is going to be a two-parter where I go over the basics of what we have for the setup of Steel Ball Run, and then I will just go through each and every interaction with some of the characters in terms of the story progression leading up to where I'm leaving off. But I will tell you, I am a big fan of JoJo's, and I do want to cover Part 7 and Part 8 in their own individual multi-parted videos. Part 7 I split in half, with me covering 50 chapters in this one video, and the next 45, which cover the second half of Steel Ball Run, will be in another part. And all I can tell you from what I read so far, it has been a really, really great journey so far, and keeps showing me why JoJo's is one of my favorite series of all time, and I just cannot wait to see more. But if you enjoy the JoJo's content on this channel, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell for updates on future videos, and it'll show that you guys enjoy the JoJo's on the channel. I do plan to make more JoJo's content outside of these basic reviews of me going through Part 7 and 8, as Part 9 is coming out, and I do want to start covering it. So I do want to make some JoJo's content here and there, so I really hope you guys stick with me with this. I am very excited to jump in to Steel Ball Run. So right away, I want to get into the premise of Steel Ball Run, which every JoJo's has a different premise or genre to differentiate itself from the other, so Araki can be more creative and try something new. In this one, we go all the way back to the 1890s. 1890 to be specific, where we have the setting in the Wild West, in a horse race across the country, starting in California and ending in New York. Which is an interesting concept in and of itself, as it takes basically a road trip aspect with developments going on in between, with chaos coming from every individual direction. A race is an interesting way to go about telling the story, as I honestly did not believe this to be very interesting with how we get into the stand battles later down the road and how the plot gets progressed. But with how Araki does it, I'm honestly very excited, because when it comes to the horse racing aspect, it adds for a lot of two-page spreads, and something I didn't really realize is how much JoJo's does do two-page spreads a lot, and the way Araki sets out the panels and even draws the action shown is honestly really incredible, especially when it comes to the horse racing aspects to it, because I'm getting engrossed in a manga where a lot of the action happens on horseback. I did not expect to get engrossed in a horse race in a manga, yet here I am. And it's only elevated by the different character interactions, the story that goes along with it, as something that I have to say, it reminds me of Stardust Crusaders, due to the fact that it was literally going from one place to another in a long journey, encountering different stand users along the way. It was an episodic format until we got actual story progression in the second half when we finally make it to Egypt. In this one, we know our clear end goal, but the story progresses through each and every individual stage of the race, with every character we meet, and certain plot points and mysteries being unraveled as we go along. And so far, not everything has been revealed, and there's still some mystery to it, which is something that I really like about JoJo's as a whole, which is something that has been there since Part 4. Primarily in Part 4, 5, and 6, as there's always been a type of mystery aspect when it comes to either who's an enemy stand user, what's their ability going to be, how are we going to meet the next stand user, how are we going to interact with them. But here, having it under the pretense of a long-distance race across the country, you will interact with other characters as quickly and as often as you possibly can. And that's something I honestly find genius. As every leg of the race, you get actual progression. We'll see a map, we'll see how each stage of the race progresses, because there is stopping points for the race to our placements, and a lot of the characters have their own reasons for entering the race, especially our main characters, who I will get into in a minute. And with each individual stages, primarily from stage 2 onwards, there are moments where anything goes. So any individual stand users that we encounter along the way, who are all basically racers in this race, will and can be encountered on depending on what routes you take, or what decisions you make as you are on your horse trying to get to the goal. Whether you take a shortcut, whether you take the long way around, or just follow the base route that is given to you by the tournament organizers. And that leads into interesting stuff going on, because there are times where you can pass through a city during the middle of a race as a long way around. You go through places and areas where you're not even supposed to, but could come out in first place anyway. There's even strategies in terms of stuff like the habits of a horse, how a horse runs, And just a lot I can get into, which I cannot, but Araki goes into a lot of detail that honestly grabs your interest. And he's not afraid of showing the brutality of being on horseback at high speeds in a long distance race. If you are not careful, if you don't manage your horse properly, you could get seriously injured yourself and your horse, or potentially even die. And this is in the 1890s. There wasn't the vast amount of medicine that we had, and it was still the early stages of the US and everything, with governments coming together. And this is an alternate universe of JoJos, which I didn't get into, but this is a different timeline of JoJos, a full reset, which, while is a bit of a bummer, given part 6 as a conclusion, it makes sense, and I'm okay with that, because we don't need any of the prior JoJo parts to know what's going on in this. Hell, most JoJo parts are self-contained stories that have some influence from the previous, but not too much. But this, Araki has a full clean slate and can start a new world and story from scratch, which I find honestly a lot of fun. Because seeing our new JoJo, seeing our new main cast that we're interacting with, as well as how these stands work, is honestly a whole lot of fun to go in through. And that's honestly what I can talk to you about part 7. It's a lot of fun. Despite JoJo is becoming more of a seinen series, showing a bit more of the adult subject matter and stuff like that, but it's not as that different from regular JoJo's. It can be a bit more brutal, but it still has that same JoJo's charm that you just get engrossed with every new chapter, with every new interaction, and you just can't wait to see what is going to happen next, because the mystery and what's happening keeps you invested. Not to mention the characters, because even the one-off character seemingly that we get from these different stand users honestly really bring us home to something amazing, which really helps with the race aspect, because you get to interact with different characters throughout each stage of the race. Because if you're in an actual cross-country race, you will come across a multitude of different people, whether they be in a city, whether they be a part of the race or not. The side tracks, the misdirects, there's a lot of stuff that could happen going cross country, and a lot of it can be due in the series through stand users or outside interference. But yeah, the racing aspect is honestly something that I've come to really enjoy from part 7. It is something very unique and shows that this story progresses with each individual chapter, and we do get to see some actual progression every single time, and some more of the overarching mystery of this series comes to light every few chapters. And that's something I really do like. Next up, let's talk about the characters. Johnny Joestar, or Jonathan Joestar, and Gyro Zeppeli. The main pair of the series is something I've grown to love. These two have really become fast friends in this entire part, and it's just fun seeing their different interactions, either in battle or just when they're goofing off, preparing food, or just talking about stuff. One of my favorite running gags so far is Gyro coming up with some weird or dumb joke, or even a song at times, and presenting it to Johnny, and Johnny thinks about it for a second and says, "That's actually pretty good. No, that's genius," as it is not even a funny joke to me, or even a catchy song, yet the two of them act like such lovable idiots that you just laugh at their whole interactions, and it's just a hell of a lot of fun. Granted, these two are incredibly intelligent characters, they just can't make jokes for shit half the time, which is honestly a really good running gag. Especially since part 7, honestly, a lot of people have said this, and I'm more inclined to agree with every few chapters, but Gyro Zeppeli really feels like the main character of the series. We get introduced to him first. He's basically our main point of view character for the opening 10 chapters, along with us seeing more of him and his backstory explored the most between him and Johnny. Now, Johnny does get development. He is the JoJo of this part, and he has a really good backstory, same with Gyro, and both broken individuals in this race for their own individual reasons. Gyro for wanting to stop a child from being executed and needs to win the prize money and to win it for his country in order to get an amnesty passed to get the kid, unable to be executed, and Johnny entering for selfish goal at first. Still kind of selfish, but after interacting with Gyro, being intrigued by him, he feels like the power that Gyro showed, the power of spin, can make him walk again. Which is an interesting change for our JoJo. This JoJo is a paraplegic. He cannot walk. He lost the use of his legs, and now he's in a wheelchair. He doesn't really use a wheelchair for the most part. He's always on horseback or he's on the ground. The thing I like is that it doesn't stop him from acting. When he needs to act, he will act. He has the determination and stubbornness of any JoJo we have seen thus far. a joestar through and through for Johnny, but he is more in the moral gray area, similar to, let's say, Giorno from Part 5, as he does end up killing characters, and this is the Wild West for the most part for the early portions of the race, so I'm just going to go with Wild West. He does kill people, he does have his own selfish motives for the most part, and even some moments that show that he's not the most morally just character in this whole series. But it makes him intriguing, it makes him three-dimensional. He has his own selfish goals, but he likes hanging out with Zeppeli. He will help people if he needs to. He'll have a sense of reason to him, but he can also be very selfish at times as well, which I kind of like. It makes a JoJo that isn't incredibly just righteous all the time, which is honestly kind of fun. And Gyro's awesome. He is a badass through and through, and he is probably a very smart character, which honestly any JoJo character is pretty damn smart, especially with how he utilizes this new power called Spin. This is not a stand ability, though I do have to say I thought he had a stand at first, and Spin I think is just this universe's replacement for Hamon, which is honestly really nice, because not only do we get stands in this part, we also have this power of Spin, and the budding relationship of these two characters starts off with Johnny wanting to know about Spin, thinking that it'll make him walk again. And after the first stage, Gyro takes Johnny on, and they end up going along this whole trip together, becoming partners in crime, basically. And it's very wholesome with their just baseline. Like I said, when it comes to like their baseline interactions, it's just very wholesome. It's like going on a trip with the boys. That's how it feels like when it comes to these two characters, and they play off each other very well. They trust each other within the first interaction with stand users, and the development between these two ends up being really awesome. To go a bit more in depth, let's start with Johnny, our JoJo. He is a jockey. He is a genius jockey from when he was a young child, and ended up competing in a multitude of different events to have his name plastered across the newspapers and getting fame and recognition. However, tragedy strikes one day when he lets that fame go to his head, and he is shot in the back by someone. He gets evicted from a line so he can cut up in front. Wrong place, wrong time. When he didn't want to do anything in that instance to begin with, if he just walked away or got on the back of the line, he would have been fine. He wouldn't even be part of this race. But it just goes to show that life is just unfair at times. One bad decision could screw you over in the end. And it makes matters worse when we dive more into his personal life, where his father didn't really treat him all that greatly. He had a really shitty dad, if I'm being honest, and it only made things worse when his older brother passed away in a racing accident. Johnny, over the years, wanted to basically be the son that his father wanted. He wanted his father's approval, even becoming a really good jockey. All coming ahead before his next race, where him and his father are in his brother's old room, and Johnny wants to borrow one of his brother's boots. His father does not want. And in the ensuing argument of the two fighting over the boot, Johnny pushes his father into a mirror, having his neck get cut up by the glass, and Johnny's shocked by what happened, trying to ask if his father's alright, but the only interaction is his father basically crying out to God, saying that he took the wrong son, breaking Johnny's heart, putting him on the path to where he is today, getting engrossed in his fame as a jockey, basically separating himself from his whole family, and leading him down the path that is today. And that's a pretty tragic backstory, if I'm being honest. I know I'm skipping over a lot of nuances, but again, I don't want to make this video like over an hour long. And now we go into Gyro, who was a relatively normal character. His father is a doctor for the common people of Italy, and the spin power is something that has been in their family for generations. Until one day, when Gyro gets old enough, he learns of the true legacy of the Zeppeli family, to be executioners for their state, for their country, where they use the power of spin to loosen the nerves to make it so the prisoners who are being executed die without any pain, without any resistance. And Gyro eventually, slowly, becomes an executioner, though he isn't as morally gray as his father, and he tends to compromise. Gyro is still a kind-hearted person with his own sense of morals, and it is to be tested one day when, like I mentioned, a child who was falsely accused of being part of a coup d'etat just because he worked at a shoe shining place where the owner was holding secret meetings. He was at the wrong place at the wrong time, and he was arrested and was going to be executed. And Gyro stepped up to it and asked if this whole thing could be appealed, because a child is most likely not a part of it. A child should not be murdered and killed for the mistakes of someone else without knowing what's going on. Until one day, he is approached by one of the members of the state, basically telling Gyro to enter the Steel Ball Run if he wants to get an amnesty so that the child can be let free. And Gyro agrees. Which, adding into the overarching story with Gyro's development in turn learning to trust more people and going across country with Johnny to find out the mysteries of this race, we end up learning that the Steel Ball Run race is a cover for something else. The organizers of this race are looking for something along the lines of this whole cross-country race. And other countries around the world, primarily Italy right now, and others are looking for something in this race. And over the course of this whole arc, we begin to learn alongside Johnny and Gyro, wondering what's going on, what is this, and how can we stop this from happening. All the while, they still want to make it to the end of the race, that being Gyro's main goal, and Johnny being more on the side of accompanying Gyro, so one, he can learn to walk again, so he can use the power of spin, and also figure out this underlying mystery that they keep finding themselves in with all these different encounters with stand users and mysterious individuals. And Gyro slowly, begrudgingly agrees to this and ends up becoming curious himself, as he is also a target of these mysterious individuals as they cross the race. The other characters of Steel Ball Run are honestly really cool. I can't name all of them right now because I'm going to be going into them a bit as we go along. But I have to say, really a nice character work for the main cast that we've been introduced to, and so far the main villain that I'll talk about later has been really interesting. Something completely I did not expect, but something I'm very happy with. The mystery of Steel Ball Run. Let's get into the mystery real quick, because that is something that we've been wondering for a long time. But honestly, Araki basically told it to us as the mystery was showing itself to us. What do I mean by this? Well, we get the beginning of one chapter talking about the death of Jesus Christ and how St. Peter basically took his body and hid it somewhere after death. And there is a map detailing where to find it, but it is nowhere to be seen on the continent that they were originating from. And it isn't until the Americas were discovered that it was realized that the map was talking about North America. How he made it there is beyond me and is yet to be explained. But it's very clear that the motive for the organization of this race is to find the body of Jesus Christ, which is an interesting idea for an arc, I have to be honest. Kind of a Da Vinci Code type deal here, with the only difference being that the hidden truth that is trying to be discovered by the US government, the president himself, and even other countries, is the location of the body of Christ. Araki does a lot of religious symbolism in JoJo's from what I've noticed over the years, but this is on the nose and a very interesting direction to take the story, because I did not expect that a cross-country race with ulterior motives ends up coming down to the search for the missing for all the different pieces of a corpse that when put together will be revealed that they are that it is the actual body of Christ from over 2,000 years ago, or in that instance, roughly 1900 years ago in the story of JoJo's. I did not expect that. I think that was one of the wildest left turns in JoJo's, and that's saying a lot because JoJo's did a full universal reset in part 6. But I'm not mad about it. I'm not really... I feel a bit indifferent towards it. I'm more intrigued by this decision of Araki because this is something that I was not expecting for this race, like I just mentioned. And I gotta be honest, I'm curious to see where this goes along. Because not only does this add an overarching mystery for the characters who don't know the identity of the corpse that they're looking for, because it is a MacGuffin race. Every individual stage, there will be a different part of the corpse somewhere in this racetrack. And Gyro and Johnny end up finding the first one that we, the audience, end up discovering, which is the right arm. Later on the road, we find the eyes, then we find the left arm, then the ears. We're on our way to get the legs at this point, and the heart is already in possession of the main villain of the arc. Which, again, I'll get into in 1 second, because that was an interesting reveal of who the main villain is going to be for this arc. But the other thing that makes things interesting for this whole fetch quest type deal, and if I'm being honest, Araki didn't really do the best job of foreshadowing it, because literally us, the audience, put 2 and 2 together the second we got the reveal of the map, the exposition of it, and actually seeing what's going on, even though he keeps doing very big teases of the identity of who it is. But it's not frustrating due to the fact that the characters that we're following are trying to figure this out as well. With Gyro having it in his mind that he has an idea of the identity, but he doesn't want to say it because it just sounds impossible. And yeah, it sounds impossible. But yeah, it's an interesting direction to go with the overarching narrative of the story and overarching goal, tying it along with why the race is happening in the first place. So I'm honestly very curious to see where it goes from here. Moving on, let's talk about the origin of stands in this universe, because there are 2 ways as of right now to obtain a stand in Steel Ball Run in this new JoJo's universe, one of which is to be in a specific area that is called a Devil's Palm, an area that appears randomly throughout the desert or in different areas where the land shifts around seemingly as if it was alive, as well as stating that it is also from a meteor that crashed on Earth centuries ago, creating the landscape that it is today, and even the lore of the Native Americans in this universe stating that this area should not be entered by anybody else they be cursed, ends up adding into an extra layer of intrigue of what is the Devil's Palm, and we do get an idea of what the Devil's Palm is as we continue to go along. But basically, if you enter this area unbeknownst, because these areas can pop up anywhere, if you go in there and you survive, most likely through a near-death experience from all the previous stand users that we've seen, if you survive a near-death experience in that area, you will awaken a stand, which is really cool, because in the previous part, the only ways for you to get a stand were if you were born with it, or someone in your family awaken theirs and then use yours to get awakened from it, or you get pierced with the stand arrow, thus awakening your stand. And in that aspect, you have to actually survive getting stabbed with the arrow in order to get the stand, or get pricked by it in Jolene and some other characters' cases. I guess it depends on the arrow. But in this, coming in this once particular area and surviving, you will most likely awaken a stand, which is a cool concept in and of itself. But from what I'm seeing, since there is a part 8, and I don't think we're going to go with the Devil's Palm, and the next option for how to get a stand in this universe is going to continue, chances are we are going to get characters that are just born with stands later down the ride, or something else is going to help with the awakening of stands. But the second way to awaken a stand is by coming in contact with one of the body parts of Jesus Christ, which is another interesting aspect to go into the story, if I'm being honest. I don't know how I feel about it all in all, because when you come in contact with a part of the body, it will be assimilated into yours. It will be hidden in your body, and it will become a part of you. And once you have one of the body parts assimilated into you, you will awaken your stand. You will awaken your stand power, and that is a really cool concept in and of itself. But what adds a greater layer of risk is that each of these parts are drawn to each other. When you have one part, let's say you have the arm and you're near the other body part, it will be drawn to it and it'll assimilate within you, or it'll draw it out from someone else who has a body part as well. If they're from what I can tell, if they're unconscious, they won't be able to fight back. But the thing that also makes this an extra layer of interesting is that those who have a stand awakened from this method could potentially lose their stand, as once that part is removed from the body, it seems that their power will disappear. As we see later down the road with Gyro, as he gives the part that he eventually gains to another character, and he even states, "I'll lose my ability, but here you go." And something similar happens with Johnny, but he only a part of what he had, of the body part that he obtained, was taken, with only a bit left, so that he could still have the stand power to defend himself. Either way, this is an interesting aspect to go for when it comes to the origin of stands in JoJo's, and I'm honestly very here for it. I love it. It's a really cool idea, and it does add a bit of intrigue and strategy to stand battles in the future, and I honestly really like it. It's really cool. Lastly, really quick, I want to talk about the main villain that's being set up for this arc, who is Funny Valentine, who is the President of the United States in this AU version of JoJo's. That was something right out of left field. I did not expect Araki to make the President the main villain of this part, but hey, things happen, and this is an interesting way to go about it, and it makes sense if this cross-country race ends up becoming a global thing, and there is a map to find basically the key to eternal power from what it takes, from what Araki's building it up to, I guess. It makes sense that the biggest backer would probably be the president themselves to try and get all this power for himself. From what I can tell, is probably for the sake of the country, and doesn't want any other nation to get it. We haven't seen too much of Valentine in this whole arc so far, but he's being built up to be a dangerous individual. He's cunning, he's conniving, he has his own close group of subordinates that he trusts with this whole gathering of the parts, and he's honestly a very strategic person, and I'm interested to see when we get more depth into him. But the thing that I find the best in part 7 compared to all previous parts is that we get introduced to him fairly early on in the story, within the first like 20 to 30 chapters in that marker, and we get a lot of the exposition and reveals from him, what the race is truly about, what he's planning, not fully though, and it just helps move the story along outside of Gyro and Johnny, as this guy gives us the information we need and sets things in motion to make the story progress outside of the main cast, outside the main characters that are doing something to progress the plot, which is something that most JoJo villains don't really do until like the second half of the series. We don't even get full reveals of who these characters are until like the midway point or the very end. That's primarily true when it comes to parts 3 and onward, and part 6 is a relatively good close second in terms of revealing the main baddie later down the road. But either way, it's nice to get the main villain introduced to us, full character design and everything right off the bat, but still leaving their ability a secret. We have no idea what they can do, but we know that they want these parts, and they're willing to do whatever it takes for it, even putting in a ton of money in a cross-continental race as a ploy to find these different parts. And I'm very curious to see what happens to him, because he does seem like a very interesting antagonist leading up to the end game of part 7, so I'm just curious to see what happens next. I can't wait to see what his stand ability actually is. Either way, I'm glad that he has a constant presence throughout the part, as we see how he reacts to certain aspects and what else is going on. So first off, I just want to say I like the opening race in stage 1, as it does end up setting up what we're going to see. A lot of strategy involving horse races, and introducing a lot of the major characters, like Gyro Zeppeli, Johnny Joestar, Pocoloco, who we don't really see too much of, Sandman. We see this part's version of Dio Brando, who is a secondary antagonist to the group, and is one of the main objectives for the current JoJo and Gyro to encounter and battle, and he ends up playing along with the main villain for now. And like I said, the first stage is literally just a race, Pocoloco managing to almost narrowly make it to first due to just sheer luck, and even giving us our first full look at a stand, which makes me curious how Pocoloco awakened the stand. Was he born with it? Did he come in contact with a body part previously? Or did he somehow enter and just survive a devil's palm? Or was he born with it? I have no idea. But he does have a lot of comedy in this aspect, and what makes this whole thing interesting with him is that he seems to have the best luck out of everyone. He starts last in the race, and he somehow makes it to first within less time somehow, and the worst things could potentially happen to him, but some good things can end up happening as well. So his luck is honestly insane. But yeah, the first stage, we see a lot of the horse race, the strategy in terms of running, and how things go for all these individual jockeys and cowboys running on horseback. And yeah, the first stage Really cool. I enjoyed it, and I just love the horse racing aspect of it. Before the second stage starts, we get introduced to Mountain Tim, ending up becoming a deputy sheriff as there was a murder of 3 previous participants. And it leads up to the second stage, as we do find out who these murderers are. It leaves off a mystery that I was honestly expecting to pay off for the overarching portion of this race, but the fact that it gets solved in the next interaction is honestly pretty cool, and I don't really mind it. Enter Mrs. Robinson. This character is interesting. I don't think that this is a stand power. Never stated as a stand power, but I do believe it's a stand power. Miss Robinson somehow has insects within their body and ends up using them for various strategic moves, like having them vibrate at a frequency to make these sensitive cactuses punch out their needles, which is something of a defense mechanism for these plants to injure Johnny and Gyro a multitude of times. But Gyro, using his ability of spin and his steel balls, manages to turn the tables on him and win in the end. Honestly, my least favorite interaction out of all these different fights that we get in this arc, but still, it wasn't boring. The Boom Boom family. Honestly, not a fan of these guys as characters, but the way they almost beat the main cast was honestly really nice. It's our first real stand battle, and it leads up to Johnny awakening his stand and us discovering that Mountain Tim himself is also a stand user. His ability allowing himself to turn himself into rope to capture enemies or just get out of certain spaces. It's a really cool ability, somewhat lackluster, but it's utilized fairly well in the story that we've seen so far, and later down the road. The Boom Booms, I wouldn't say they're interesting characters, they're just one-off villains that don't really do too much, though this is an interesting fight where our cast is magnetized and they're doomed to basically have iron pull towards each other, and the closer the family gets to them, they do end up having the risk of them smashing together and just having their internal organs just splatter all over the place, similar to what happened with the deaths of the 3 racers from right before stage 2 started, revealing that it was this group of stand users that killed them. And in the midst of this stressful event, Johnny awakens his stand power and manages to defeat the Boom Boom family, only to realize, thanks to Mountain Tim, that they are in a devil's palm. So Johnny awakened his stand in a devil's palm, and they managed to get out of there before they're lost. But the Boom Boom family is stuck in there as well. Honestly, the fight, not too amazing, but the fact that we got the Mountain Tim and as part of the main cast, and Johnny awakening his stand, which are fingernails that can be launched as bullets, it's really cool. And it gets utilized in really creative ways as we go on. Olya Kamova has a really interesting stand ability in which it allows them to turn anything they touch into landmines with pins on it, and you have to hold down the pins in order for you not to blow up like a landmine, which has a bunch of interesting aspects put into this fight, with Oyakamova using his abilities in very interesting ways, which is honestly pretty interesting. I do really like it, and yeah, we have a lot of interesting set pieces going through a river, a dust storm, wasps. He turns all of these into landmines, which the main group barely manages to get away with Johnny managing to, with Gyro's help, turn the tables on their opponent and utilizing the ability against him, tricking him and landing a decisive blow with a steel ball, basically ending the fight. Honestly, this was the first real high-stakes fight, I really have to say, that I found really interesting in Steel Ball Run. Nothing too crazy, but the idea of someone that can turn anything they touch into landmines and trying to figure out a creative way to utilize your stand power to trick them and to get a clean hit was honestly really nice. Pork Pie Hat Kid. Honestly, this is a really interesting fight. This didn't last super long, but it was interesting. They fight against a stand user with the ability called Wire, which allows him to use wenches with hooks from his mouth, puts them in a plate of water to teleport them from different aspects, whether it be insects, feathers, or even another human being or living creature. He's able to basically hook them like fish and reel them up. And this adds a layer of mystery and tension, as this happens to Gyro getting taken out of the fight fairly early. And with some interesting aspects, Johnny is left to fight alone. For his stand, for us to actually see the full design of Johnny's stand, and seeing him manage to take down Pork Pie all on his own, yes, Gyro did do some help in terms of pointing Johnny in the right direction to find the location of the stand user. But either way, this was really nice in terms of developing Johnny and having him come to terms with his ability to try and keep moving. Hell, we even get an interesting aspect where Johnny turns his toenails into spin bullets and uses that to help himself move. Honestly, this is a nice cat and mouse game where Johnny does some fairly interesting stuff to manage to land some hits on the stand user, even managing to use the stand user's own ability against him, which is a classic joestar way of doing things. And while it seems like Johnny had no choice in order to save Gyro, he had to give up part of the corpse that he was holding without realizing it, but Gyro in that last instance managed to make the nails spin and uses them to hit Pork Pie and kill him, ending the fight, thus ensuing the quest to try and find out what's going on, and having the two of them fully come to terms with trusting each other with their own backstories and their reason. And now sets up the overarching mystery and quest to find the rest of the corpse pieces for the main cast. Scary monsters. This is honestly a very, very interesting set of chapters, an interesting mini-arc, as basically Dio is our main antagonist for this portion of the arc, with the mystery of what's going on with Dio after a chance encounter and realizing that Dio becoming a dinosaur somehow, which honestly, when I first read this, I thought, this is Dio's stand ability. It's very different, but I'm okay with it. It's very interesting and it changes things for Dio. But as we move on, we see that this ability is like a virus. Once you're cut with the claws of a dinosaur, particularly right now Dio, you become a dinosaur. Whether it be mice, other people, or dead corpses, you become a dinosaur. And Johnny and Gyro are slowly turning into them as they race to find the next corpse piece, as they find out where it is, and they have to get there before they fully become dinosaurs, become mindless slaves to the stand user. And the reveal that Dio isn't even the person that had the stand, he was a victim of this power, is honestly a really nice twist. And then we end up coming on to the next batch of corpse pieces, which are the eyes. And this, I have to say, is really cool because it all comes down to Johnny willingly giving up the arm that he had to become a dinosaur, so that he's able to knock the eyes out of the actual stand user's hands and get it over to Gyro, so he could use it to resist the stand user's power for a bit. But in the end, even after defeating the stand user, Dio takes the other eye, and he in turn becomes a stand user as well, turning the stand power that was used on him and becoming it his own. So now he has the ability to turn things into dinosaurs now and become a dinosaur himself. Honestly, fairly interesting. I was honestly expecting it to be a reveal like Dio now can use the world from part 3. I wouldn't be opposed to that. I don't think anybody would be opposed to that. It fits Dio's character regardless. But this is a really interesting twist and leads into more interesting battles to come. So yeah, Dio now has a corpse part, and now he is searching for other parts similar to Johnny and Gyro. So now they have a rival for this whole aspect of the race in order to find the missing pieces. Definitely one of my favorite fights and batch of chapters in this part so far. And Dio does steal the show because he still has the charisma that he had in previous parts, even though this is a different version of him. So I'm really happy that he's not a one-off villain and he's going to be a recurring character in this part, as Dio is a constant threat to Gyro and Johnny, so they constantly have to be on their toes to try and get ahead of Dio so we don't lose to him in the race or in the quest to find the missing pieces. Mandam. Now this is a really cool stand power. So Johnny and Gyro, on the path to the next stage, end up encountering a character called Hot Pants with a stand ability that uses their own flesh as a weapon, whether to heal or to just suffocate somebody, or it's used in a variety of different ways, which is an interesting power. But the three of them end up coming across an old house out on their route, and they discover Ringo Road again, and his stand, Mandam, which is a time-based stand. So early in this part, and we already have a character with a time-based stand. I thought this guy was going to be important through the overarching arc of the story, but no, he's only in this one mini arc, and it's perfectly fine. This stand power allows them to rewind time by 6 seconds, and at the start of this batch of chapters, we see that the main group have been trying to get out of this one area, but they keep looping back around to the same spot over and over and over again, and it's revealed that Rodigan has been using his stand to rewind time 6 seconds every time, to the point where these characters have been losing roughly an hour of their time, thinking that they're going around in circles, wondering what's going to happen. And we see various attempts for them to beat Rodigan, but he keeps rewinding time somehow, to the point where he ends up having the upper hand every single time. This leads into Johnny being knocked unconscious, same with Hot Pants, and Gyro injured, leading to a final confrontation between the two of them in a true standoff, where we actually get Rodigan's origin story, which is honestly very tragic and messed up, as his family was poor and lived out in the countryside, being deemed as traitors due to the actions of his father. One night, his whole family is murdered by a deranged man who, from what I can tell, was a deserter from the army, and kills his mother and sisters and begins to force himself on him. Ringo managing at the very last second to shoot and kill this man to save his life. And in that instance, his frail body felt whole again. He did not feel like he was constantly being injured because he had a condition where he kept bleeding. And he began to find a path forward and follow that path to wherever it led him, so that his life would be easier. Which leads into the confrontation between Gyro and Rodigan in a final confrontation, where Gyro actually uses his stand for the first time. Well, we truly see his stand for the first time with the ability to scan objects and people with X-ray vision. Managing to land a hit, Gyro continues to exploit Rodigan's ability to rewind time multiple times. And after certain aspects, Gyro gets one over as he managed to memorize where the debris lands and utilize that to stop Rodigan from using his stand power and winning in the end. With it then being revealed at the end that Rodigan actually sent a carrier pigeon find the president and inform him of what's to come, who has the corpse pieces, and where the next one lies. But yeah, this is honestly one of my favorite fights in this part. I know I didn't describe it all too well, but Rodigan had a really awesome stand power, being able to rewind time multiple times for his favor, but ends up losing due to Gyro's stand ability being able to scan everything and memorizing where certain debris pieces, the debris, fall around, and utilizing that to prevent him from using stand power within a 6-second interval, so he wouldn't be able to rewind time. Lucy Steele and Blackmore. Now this was an interesting arc of chapters, because not only did this utilize a type of cat and mouse game where Lucy manages to figure out what the president is planning and tries to stop it, fearing for her husband's life, but also Blackmore, who soon figures out that Lucy is the one who is behind taking the message of the location of the next corpse piece, which is the spine, which Rodigan managed to figure out after capturing Johnny in the previous batch of chapters. And so, after Mountain Tim comes and saves her, she goes off to find the next corpse piece while Mountain Tim fights off Blackmore, with Mountain Tim sadly dying in a fight against him, not knowing the true nature of Blackmore's stand ability, which allows him to solidify the water and raindrops, making it so that they are like blades. With Blackmore figuring out that Lucy is behind taking the message from Rodigan to the president, he goes off to try and find her, and this leads into Lucy finding the spine and trying to find Johnny and Gyro, who have been fighting Dio, who is also on his way to find the spine. So you have a two-battle front, Lucy, a non-stand user, fighting against a stand user, while Johnny and Gyro are fighting off against Dio in a race to claim the next corpse piece. Lucy manages to seemingly kill Blackmore or leave him for dead after shooting him a multitude of times. She then meets up with Johnny and Gyro as they just barely manage to beat Dio and kind of break his spirits in a really satisfying manner, though I have to admit, seeing Dio lose is honestly pretty fun, considering now he has to become the underdog and take down Johnny and Gyro once all is said and done. And this whole horse racing aspect is played into the stand battle because Dio constantly uses his dinosaur ability to turn stuff like fleas into dinosaurs to attack Gyro's horse. Gyro managing to outwit Dio and him and Johnny working together managed to cause Dio to lose his horse, have his horse be injured, and basically be knocked out of the race temporarily and unable to claim the corpse piece. After running into Lucy, they begin to be told the situation, that the president is the one behind it, and they still want to know who is responsible or who the identity of the corpse is. We then get a pretty fun and really cool battle between Blackmore, who manages to use his stand power to keep himself from bleeding out. But eventually, through some really quick-witted use of spin by Gyro, managed to land a decisive blow on Blackmore, and once he was knocked unconscious, his stand ability deactivated and he bled out and died. With the final corpse part entering Johnny, revealing the next 3 corpse part locations. So this wasn't really too much of a fight in terms of the Blackmore portion, but the intrigue of how the enemy are viewing the fact that there might be a traitor or someone that is out looking for the corpse pieces along with them and trying to sabotage them is really cool, as right now with Blackmore dead, they don't know what's going on or who the person sabotaging them actually is, which Lucy has to remain unwitting. She has to just play the part, stay as Steel's wife, and not draw any attention to herself. But Gyro gives her his right eye, the eye that was part of the corpse that he had, and kept it with her so that she could find an opportunity to go and steal whatever parts that the president had, to keep it away from him, and to stop his grand master plan, whatever it may be. So that is another plot point that we'll get back to later. What is interesting is that Dio strikes a deal with the president, stating that he wants Manhattan in return for the eye that he has, the identity of the traitor, and even taking back the parts that were given and taken by Gyro and Johnny. And Gyro even asks for another stand user to be his accomplice and his partner to help take down Gyro as a team, and the president begrudgingly agrees and gives him a stand user, who we then learn their identity and their ability, which is honestly pretty interesting, and it's used in very creative ways with Dio's power. Which now, let's get into the next portion, A Silent Way. In this section, Gyro and Johnny end up having to battle Sandman, a character who is the first person we actually interact with in this whole series, the first point of view character, who enters this race in order to have the money to buy the land back from the US in order to make it better for his people. And he is revealed to be the one that the president sent with Dio to take down Gyro and Johnny. And what ensues is Dio utilizing his dinosaur powers in a very unique way, turning plants and crops into dinosaurs, flying dinosaurs and some mini raptor type things, with Sandman's power, A Silent Way, where he's able to write certain sounds on it similar to echoes from part 4, where once you come in contact with it, the effect activates, whether it be burning, slashing, cutting. All that happens, and we have to see Johnny and Gyro learning how to deal with it. And they're basically on the defensive for the majority of this whole fight, trying to find a way to find the stand user who is actually hiding in the brush. And there's actually an instance where we get a fake out, a red herring, where we think it is the Japanese racer, especially since written on the dinosaurs is the Japanese wording in kanji for everything that happens. So yeah, that's very interesting. This section also dives more into Johnny's backstory, but I already basically covered the gist of it earlier when I was talking about Johnny, so I won't get too into it. But it does lead into more growth for Johnny, as him and Gyro are stuck in the river, injured from this fight, with Gyro trying to keep Johnny from half-assing it, and basically makes it so that Johnny has to learn more about spin, the next lesson, and teaches him about the golden ratio. Now, I do not have a degree in mathematics or architecture, so I can't talk about the golden ratio as in detail as Gyro does in this section. All you gotta know is that it is the basis for spin and being able to follow the course and spin infinitely. But yeah, the two of them are stuck in a river, and Gyro injures himself protecting Johnny from behind, from a whole attack from these sound creatures. And this leads into Johnny basically breaking down, wondering what is he going to do. He can't do this until he actually begins to figure out what Gyro meant in terms of the golden ratio and how spin works. And in doing so, his stand evolves, and we see it with how his stand looks entirely differently, and his power alters in a really awesome way. Where before, he only spun his finger and toenails as disc bullets that went at high speeds, that only went in straight directions. But now, he's able to shoot his fingers like actual pistols with 10 shots, and after it hits something, it curves and it follows up until a certain point when it hits its intended target. And it's honestly really cool seeing how this ability has evolved over this entire fight, leading to Sandman finding cool and unique ways to avoid Johnny's bullets, and even bringing everything down to a standoff between Johnny and Sandman, where they both have one shot to win. Johnny with only one finger bullet left, and Sandman having all the advantage right now, despite being injured, to take down Johnny, figuring out how his ability ends up working. Johnny almost gets him by getting his heart, but then Sandman manages to avoid a lethal blow to his heart, leaving Johnny with no ammo left. But right when Sandman thinks he's won, Johnny manages to use one of the steel plates that Gyro had on him, and uses spin to create a steel ball, using his stand to land a lethal blow, killing Sandman in the end. With Sandman wishing nothing but for her sister to be well and to be safe. Honestly, I did not expect Sandman to die in this early section of the arc. I thought he was going to become a part of the main JoJo crew, similar to how Mountain Tim, but he ended up dying, so I don't know who else is going to be part of this group, because right now it's basically Lucy, Gyro, and Johnny, and I believe Hot Pants to an extent, as we'll get into a little bit later. But yeah, honestly, this is probably like my second favorite fight, outside of the fight between Rodigan and Gyro, utilizing the whole time rewind thing. And this one really does help with the development of Johnny as a character, and just showing all the different things happening with Johnny, and the stand evolution, having his powers evolve in that one fight, coming to terms with his own weakness, and moving past it and figuring out more to spin, which in turn helps his stand evolve, which is also based off of the power of spin. I am sad that Sandman had to die. I thought he was actually going to be part of the main group, but I guess Araki is making it so that not every character is going to be safe. I mean, that's kind of how JoJo rolls at times. But it would have been nice to have someone like Sandman with his really cool and unique stand power to fight against the main villain. But either way, really awesome fight. I enjoyed it, and Johnny had some really awesome development in this fight, which only gets to be further portrayed in the next batch of chapters. But this interaction ends with Johnny being knocked unconscious and having the corpse parts that he had, the left arm and the spine, taken from him by Hot Pants, who leaves a portion of it in Johnny so he could still use the stand ability, and so they could potentially be useful to finding more corpse pieces. As Hot Pants does seem to be part of the same government as Gyro, so that's an interesting thing to go about it, and adds a bit more complexity in terms of there being other factions watching over Gyro, showing that he was most likely sent here on this race to uncover these corpse pieces. Now we're on to the second last section of the video, Sugar Mountain. Now this isn't a full-on action set piece until later down the road, but I do like the implications of this, as Gyro and Johnny, trying to escape a group of horsemen on horseback, try to get Gyro's steel ball back from a mysterious girl who goes into a tree trunk. And after a series of questions and stuff like that, they realize that this girl is part of a bizarre stand power, where she presents whatever's been knocked in the river to them along with something else. If they lie, something will happen to them and they'll get stuck in the tree. But if they tell the truth, not only will they get what they lost back, but they'll get something else, like a diamond and gold. And eventually, after Gyro figures everything out, they eventually, through doing this the right way, telling the truth with every single instance, manage to get the ears of the corpse, as well. They got over $100,000 or something like that, which is a lot of money. But yeah, this ends up leading into more of the technical give and take aspect of this ability, this power, where essentially once you obtain something from the tree, you have to use up everything you've obtained through this ability by sunset, or else become a part of the tree and become a guardian, which has happened to this girl and her parents and countless others who haven't been able to spend whatever they received from the tree by sunset. And the only way for everyone to be set free is essentially if they manage to use up everything that they've been given. This leads Johnny and Gyro in a last-ditch effort to try and get rid of not just diamond and gold, but also all the cash that they have as well. Everything that they've gained from her ability that didn't originally belong to them. We see them trying to give this stuff away, but they end up becoming tree parts and begin to melt into the ground and be brought into the tree until they take that stuff back. Which means, in order for them to get rid of the money and the gold, they have to sell it. They have to trade it for something of equal value, otherwise they'll become a part of the tree. Now this ends up adding a bit more stuff into it, a bit more complexity, as well, they're being encountered by 11 individuals. They try and spend a lot of money by eating a crap ton of food, buying a building, spending money on horses, finding other technicalities and stuff like that, but in the end, whatever they end up doing, they end up making more money, which ends up being hilarious. Even though this is a high-stakes situation, they end up just not losing all the money. This is like a classic comedic situation with undertones of them basically potentially, well, dying a gruesome death or being a part of a tree for the rest of their life, being doomed to repeat a constant and unending cycle. This all comes to a head when they're in a casino trying to win back their money and trying to lose it all in a casino since it's a technicality and stuff like that. But then this group of mercenaries come in who, well, they aren't a group of mercenaries. They're just one person, one stand user, who was able to split himself up into a multitude of people, 11 seemingly to be precise, and they then begin a full-on massacre in the casino, where Johnny and Gyro are heavily injured from the bullets and are trying to find a way to get rid of all of the clones of this guy and survive. Which honestly leads to really fun and really cool usage of Johnny's stand abilities and Gyro's spin. But in the end, they're stuck behind a pillar, outnumbered, and not sure what to do next. Especially since, even if you kill one, the other clones will pop out of one of the corpses and they keep moving from corpse to corpse. In the end, when they are basically about to lose, Gyro manages to come in with the save, as he actually managed to pay all of the other gunmen and gamblers in the area and bodyguards as bodyguards by paying them for string and to protect them from the guy that's doing it, because earlier we saw that they weren't getting involved, but he paid them with gold, the diamond, and all the money that they had and gained, and thus they finished their transaction with the girl and they managed to complete it. And right when they think that they're all set up, they used up everything they had, suddenly Gyro begins to meld with the wall and slowly becomes part of the tree. Until then, Johnny figures out why this is happening. The transaction wasn't complete because the money and the gold wasn't the only thing they gained. It was the corpse pieces, the arm and the ears, which means they have to give it up or trade it in for something in order for Gyro to be taken care of. Johnny's perfectly fine. Gyro was the one who is being taken by the tree, and Gyro is slowly being pulled into the wall, much by Johnny's sheer shock and horror, and he's having an internal conflict. What am I going to do? It's sunset. Do I give up all this? Do I give up my purpose being in this race to save Gyro, or do I give it up, or do I give up Gyro to the doom to die, condemning my friend in order to basically end up saving myself? And this, I have to say, leads to honestly one of my favorite decisions and moments. Johnny refusing to give the corpse parts away because he doesn't want to, with that being the last thing that Gyro sees, and gets pulled away into the tree as Johnny laments over his decision. The girl thinks that it's a shame because she thought that Gyro and Johnny were going to be the ones to end this curse, this endless cycle. Until a few pages later we realize and see that her parents disappeared and Gyro was being returned to normal. And that could only happen if Johnny gave up the pieces. And as revealed, as Johnny is crying on the ground, he gave the pieces to the gunman that was trying to kill them earlier as a transaction to leave them alone. And Johnny tells them to get out of here. So they ended up losing the pieces that they gained right in this instance. And Johnny did that to save his friend. Johnny had everything right now. He had he had what he wanted, and that could have made him a lot stronger in the end, and potentially even helped him find the other pieces. Now, seeing him give it all up, putting them at such a huge disadvantage just to get his friend back, is honestly really heartwarming and wholesome. It was honestly one of my favorite moments in this whole section of the story, and I was originally going to end it here, because even though Johnny is crying on the ground over his decision and had to do it to save his friend, Gyro, thinking back to his previous experiences, ends up telling Johnny, look, we lost them right now, but there are still more corpse pieces, right? So why not go after them next? Let's get the ball running and get the ball into the other net. I'm not going to say this in the entire speech, but Gyro picks Johnny back up and tells him that it's time to head off. We're about to do something, we're about to find the other corpse pieces, so we lost them, we'll end up getting them back. Don't worry about it, and I'm going to help you along the way. Thus making their bond one of the strongest things in the series, and it's just really nice seeing that how these characters ended up growing closer together as friends, as brothers throughout this entire story, and we're only halfway done. Now, originally I was going to end off the video with this portion, but I need to talk about one last section that sets the ball back in the court of the heroes, in which case is really cool. Dio, even though losing Sandman, gave information about who the person that ended up betraying the president is, but not who exactly they were, but it was a woman of a certain height and weight, and tells it to one of the president's right-hand men, one of his most trusted allies, and is confused on who it could possibly be, and that maybe they aren't a stand user, or if they are a stand user. And so they begin an investigation, and we get the reveal of this new guy's new power, which is called Tubular Bells, where it basically blows something up like a balloon, whether it be a solid object or a nail or something, ties it up, and it ends up taking a scent over something. And used it where the phone was called to call Mountain Tim to rescue Lucy. And now the scent of Lucy is memorized by the stand, so the second Lucy is shown, she will in fact be attacked by the stand. And this leads to us going back to Lucy's perspective. With everything that's going on, she realizes that they're looking for her, and whatever she has to do to get the corpse pieces and help Johnny and Gyro, she has to do it now. Thus leading her to try and seduce the president's wife, Scarlet, as through process of elimination, she ends up thinking that Scarlet is into women, which ends up being correct. So Scarlet is confirmed bisexual in the series, since she is married to Funny Valentine, but is also interested in women. And this leads into her various interactions with Scarlet, ends up going to the president's house, and her becoming Scarlet by copying her scent, as she previously had teamed up with Hot Pants, being given the mission to infiltrate the president's house and steal whatever corpse pieces he did in fact have, in order to keep it away from him and to stop whatever plans he's trying to do with them. And this ends up being very interesting because Lucy had to knock out Scarlet in order to infiltrate the president's room during his nap, since she mentions that there is a time of day where the president has a nap for 30 minutes. So this could be a thing regarding his stand power, or this could just be something he just does because he likes taking naps. It's never really explained. But either way, she ends up taking advantage of this and uses the ability given by Hot Pants to turn into Scarlet in order to trick the president into thinking that she is in fact his wife, in order to get close enough to steal the corpse pieces. She manages to put Funny Valentine back to sleep, but because the president had his right-hand man's power, Tubular Bells, in his room with the scent of the traitor, the scent of Lucy, she was then attacked by the stand, injuring her in the leg. And in that instance, after being injured, Scarlet, regaining consciousness, wakes back up and sees Lucy impersonating her, and realizes that she's a stand user, so obviously she knows about the stands and the corpse pieces and everything, and the two of them begin to fight, Lucy getting shot by Scarlet, but in the end, after being in a very desperate situation, Scarlet manages to turn the tables at the last minute by making Hot Pants' power transfer over to Scarlet, thus making Scarlet have the same scent as Lucy, redirecting the stand towards Scarlet, and Scarlet dying from this stand. Now Lucy, stuck in the bathroom, is now being cornered by one of the president's right-hand men, and also the Secret Service. Hot Pants appears as basically trying to stall for time and trying to get Lucy out of there. She fights the user of Tubular Bells, and after a desperate battle, seemingly getting dismembered multiple times and nearly killed, manages to turn the tables on Tubular Bells, using her stand in a unique way, which basically makes it so that now whenever he blows air into something, his pipes will close up, and thus he will explode. And he ends up killing himself by not listening to Hot Pants, and thus ends up kind of blowing open his own neck. And in the closing aspect of this whole section, Hot Pants escapes with the corpse pieces after it's revealed that Lucy managed to take all of them from the president. But Hot Pants wasn't able to take all of the corpse pieces, leaving the backbone and the left arm with Lucy. And Lucy, having to use Hot Pants' power to turn back into Scarlet, she has to impersonate the president's wife for as long as possible, until the race is over and until the corpse pieces have been assembled and taken away out of the hands of Funny Valentine. Leaving Lucy behind enemy lines, having to deal with the fact that she is now in the care of her greatest enemy and the enemy of her husband, not knowing what he's up to and has no real way of fighting back right now. And that's honestly the real section. Steel Ball Run has honestly been a really fun experience so far, and there's 45 chapters left. 50 chapters in, and we already have a bunch of twists and turns. Hot Pants, who seems to be kind of allied with Gyro and Johnny, but is in a different faction, going for the corpse pieces, managed to get them all away from the president. Johnny and Gyro are on their way to find another piece of the corpse after losing the two that they ended up gaining. Dio is still in the race and is doing things for his own gains, and the president is none the wiser of what's going on, yet is still stressed out and is trying to find the corpse pieces. This is all leading into something really awesome, and I can't wait to see where this culminates into, because we still have the race to go with, and we don't even know what Funny Valentine's stand ability actually is. So I'm very curious to see where that's going to go and what other stand users will see, because I honestly can't wait. As we're entering the end game of the story, we're at the halfway point, and I'm curious to see what's going to happen next. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 7 has honestly become my favorite part of JoJo so far, and is honestly going to be in one of the parts of JoJo's that I would just go back and reread on my own free time whenever I just want to just read something. And honestly, if we ever get an anime sometime, which I'm giving a timeline, if we do get a anime adaptation of Steel Ball Run, probably 2025 if I have to be completely honest with you. But either way, Steel Ball Run has just been a really, really fun time. I love this manga so much, and just shows how much JoJo's has just evolved over the course of the series. Some parts are better than others. That's kind of how things go with a long-running series, especially with a series like JoJo's, which switches protagonists and settings and just genres in general, while keeping the major vibe within this one particular story, so you just know it's JoJo's. And yeah, it was honestly a really great experience, and I'll get into that in a minute. But things are going to be a bit more simpler in terms of me talking and going through the story. If there are certain aspects you want me to go a bit more in-depth reviews, I'll do them. If these JoJo's videos end up doing well, I do want to make more JoJo's content, and that will actually give some more videos that I could actually do in the future, as JoJo's is not something that can get old anytime soon, and you could always find something with any of the previous matchups and stuff like that. So leave a comment down below for any fights you want me to do videos on in general. The final fight, I could just do a whole video on the final fight. I might do that actually, but I am going to be a bit more in detail with what's going on in there, not like super point by point, line by line, and all that stuff. But yeah, let's hit that intro and get right into Steel Ball Run's final review, I hope. The Wrecking Ball arc was honestly something I really enjoyed. It was a nice thing to start off the second half of the series review. I liked the fight. Weka Pipo being revealed to be a steel ball user, being able to use the power of spin, is honestly something that I was not expecting, because so far I've only seen Gyro use it, but having someone else that could use this particular ability, other than Johnny, who was learning especially through his stand, and using that to develop his stand, is something that I found really interesting, and the fact that it has a different application, it can be used in a different way than Gyro's specific technique of using spin, was really cool. If it just so much as grazes you, or even like the little like mini balls on the steel ball that he has, I'm gonna say ball a lot in this video, aren't I? But if it even so much as grazes you, it ends up messing up the signals to your brain, and you can't even see, feel, or even register anything on the left side of your body. So that really makes the fight very interesting, because they have to constantly look over their right shoulder to turn counterclockwise to try and see the next attack that's coming at them, and Gyro's trying to find a way to beat him. The fact that they're on a snowy tundra is something that didn't ever occur to me. The fact that it was explained previously that the golden rectangle, you need like actual life to draw inspiration from, and the fact that they're in like an Iceland right there on like a frozen lake, and there's nothing to like get a concept for, or for that whole golden ratio, puts Gyro at a massive disadvantage. Same with John, even though he has his nail bullets, and that's something really cool. Magenta's stand ability, it's alright. It's nothing too flashy. Literally, he just stands completely still. Any attack that goes at him just gets redirected, but he stays completely still the entire time. I like how Magenta's kind of like a cocky bitch for the most part, because literally Gyro just plays him at the end, basically taking a bullet that was used to shoot him, use it with spin, and then hitting the guy in the head from up top with that exact same bullet, getting a pretty easy headshot. And the way they beat Wicca People was, some people will probably call that like plot armor or Deus Ex Machina, and that does kind of fall into it, but it plays into the effect that Wicca People was actually pretty, he rushed his victory to an extent. He went after and shot the wolf that was holding the pieces of the corpse that they were after in that whole lake area, and by doing so the water splashed into the air, ended up freezing and turning into snow, giving Gyro a reference for the golden ratio so he could actually win in the end. In the end, he brought about his own demise, and I found that really, really freaking cool. Wicca People's backstory is honestly very tragic. The fact that he basically forced his sister into an arranged marriage, found out that the guy that she married her off to, someone that he knew, was physically abusing her to the point where she loses sight in her left eye, leading to him trying to get the marriage annulled by the Pope himself, leading to a steel ball duel, showing that there are multiple people in like Gyro's homeland in service to the royalty that knows how to use spin. So that's an interesting piece of lore that I did not expect, and it was really cool. The tragic part is that despite him winning in the end, he got betrayed by his own country, because that man's father didn't want the embarrassment, so he kind of just exiled him basically, and just made it write it off as he was dead. And over the years, Wicca People thought that his sister had died, and so he really only like went under Valentine's command because he just wanted to live out the rest of his days in peace as a full citizen, and that was basically it. He thought he had nothing, and I liked how it tied into Gyro's flashbacks and how he actually met Wicca People's sister, had the opportunity to save her, but fate had other things in mind, revealing that Gyro's father left her alive and exiled her brother for their own safety, and chose not to heal her with the steel ball, because apparently with spin they could have actually like mended some of the wounds to make her see again. But he did that in order to protect her, because if she could see again, that would make her a witness and liability to her ex-husband's father, and that probably would have gotten her killed. So at the moment, she's living a peaceful life, and I like that bit. It gives Wicca People a sense of relief that his only real family that he cares about is alive and is actually somewhat happy and is somewhere safe. So I like that, and as a debt to repay, Gyro actually asks Wicca People to try and find and look after Lucy Steele, as she's kind of gotten herself into some trouble with Funny Valentine. And yeah, I like that, and it sets something up for Wicca People to do later on the road, but I kind of expect them to do a bit more, but I'll get into that when I get into that section. Also, Magenta is still fucking alive. How? How is this man alive from a bullet through the skull? From above. The man has insane luck, and he's in the middle of a frozen tundra. I don't know. I mean, when we get back to it, it makes sense how he kind of survived, not freezing to death at least. Still, it irks me. Then again, stuff happens in JoJo's, so who am I to complain? Real quick note, I just want to say that when they finish the current stage of the race that they're in right after fighting Wicca People, they actually managed to get ahead of Loco Poco, who his stand gives insane luck, and they do it through a combination of Johnny's second act of Tusk together with Gyro's spin and steel ball to create like a bridge. That's something that's never used again, which I feel is kind of a shame, but I can see it's only really needed for that one specific situation. It was really cool, and I like that that basically led to their victory. Now on to the Civil War arc, and it does not mean what you think it means. Kind of. So, I like that this whole mini arc right here starts off with Stephen Steele finding, quote-unquote, the corpse of his wife, Lucy. But we then later figure out that it is not Lucy, but in fact it was Scarlet, who, thanks to Hot Pants' stand, had her appearance changed. And Lucy's basically masquerading as Valentine's wife to try and get the other corpse, to try and, do something about him. At least until she can get away. With Johnny and Gyro trying to follow Hot Pants to try and get the other corpse parts from her, or to at least find out what her deal is, they follow her to an abandoned cathedral, where they end up encountering a new stand user with the stand called Civil War. And I like how this ability is utilized. Its whole ability is that it takes up the sins of the target, brings them to life, and once they come in contact, they'll slowly start to, I think, like, flatten them and kill them slowly. And the more sins you consider yourself to have, the more chance you have to get it taken by this. And the only way to actually remove it is to either get away from the stand's range, from what it seems, or just pour water on whatever's being conjured up by this stand to quote-unquote purify it. Which is actually a pretty interesting way to symbolize to wash away your sins. And honestly, Gyro is kind of, not doing too much in this one particular section because he unknowingly fell into the stand's trap. And since the whole Look at People thing was mostly focused on Gyro previously, this one is focused a lot on Johnny and his mentality and how he develops in this arc. Another thing I just want to make note of before I get fully into this is I like how Valentine basically deduced where Johnny and Gyro were going, and this actually leads into how this arc ends. I like that regardless, in every single portion of the story, Valentine will always have a presence. We'll cut back to him to hear his thoughts on what's going on and how things are being set up. And I like that this stand Civil War literally just makes this whole arc feel very high tension. The steel ball that Gyro uses is just not utilized well at all due to the fact that the second he throws it away, a multitude of steel balls appear, and it's just every single steel ball he's used throughout his life, and if he touches the wrong one, bam, he ends up having that thing absorbed into his body. Also, this brief glimpse into Hot Pants' backstory is honestly very tragic. The fact that she and her brother were stuck in a narrow cave being attacked by a bear, and she, out of sheer desperation, gave her brother up to this bear, and she survived. And seeking forgiveness for her sins, she went to a monastery to try and be forgiven, but she could never let go of the guilt of what she's done. So she thought doing this, get the corpse parts, could actually help relieve her of that sin, and maybe make her life easier to live and to be forgiven. But through this stand, she's never really let it go, and it's just, she buckles under the stand user, nearly dying as a result. And Johnny, after everything that's going on, he's encountered with actually the mouse Danny that he let go, to later his father and his brother, which causes a lot of psychological torture to him. All while he's desperately struggling to get to that canteen on his horse to douse himself in water to make sure that the stand ability doesn't affect him. He manages to just narrowly get the water to spray on him with his nail bullet as the mouse jumps on top of him, washing away all the sins, but the mouse gets away. And as Johnny tries to get ready to shoot the mouse, he then gets contacted by Jesus Christ. Literally. We all know that that what they're looking for is the body of Christ right now, and Johnny right now has the legs. And apparently, in this instance, Johnny is being told, if your heart is wavering, do not shoot. And I like how this is portrayed with Johnny's stand Tusk next to the spiritual form of Jesus contacting him, for all I know. And this actually leads into something going on later down the road, as his legs, this is something that gets alluded to multiple times throughout this last portion, but Johnny's legs start to, move, little by little twitches, as if his legs are getting ready to heal. And that's actually a nice piece of attention to detail that I'll get into also, but that's really nice. And it's a good way to help progress Johnny's character. It's a nice physical representation, aside from Johnny's stand, of how he's grown throughout this entire series. It's not just with his whole different acts for Tusk, with different character beats, but also his legs are starting to get feeling in them again, which, I mean, we kind of expected that to be something down the road that happened, but seeing something like that happen before the end of the story, I really like it. It's a nice piece of attention to detail, and I like how even Johnny kind of acknowledged it also. Johnny makes it back into the church and actually manages to deduce and find the stand user, and actually just barely manages to kill him. But then it's revealed that that's actually what the user wanted to begin with. He wanted Johnny to kill him so that he would end up having all of his sins transferred to Johnny, and this user would be revived as a ghost from his own stand ability. And the stand ability would still be active. So now, all of the people that are basically like being killed because of him, whether directly or not, this stand user, all of his sins are transferred to Johnny, and now all of these people are attacking Johnny. And that's honestly really messed up, because Johnny's literally getting attacked by a bunch of literal corpses being brought back to haunt him. And I think it's kind of blatantly obvious, at least in my interpretation of how this stand works, is that it literally forces everyone to confront what either they perceive are their past sins, or just what is considered a sin in the eyes of the stand, and they have to confront the ghosts of their past to either purify themselves or risk getting consumed by that very guilt. And I like how throughout all this, as Johnny's being torn to shreds, the literal embodiment of Jesus is telling him not to shoot if he's wavering, but then through that, Johnny gets the idea of who or exactly where he should shoot his bullet, and he shoots himself, causing him to get spun up into the infinity hole that he creates. Because again, this is used with the golden ratio, with the concept of infinity, so Johnny literally ends up being sucked into that little hole that he created, evolving his stand into Tusk Act 3. And I like the design also. But by doing this, Johnny's able to move around with the spin holes that he creates, and even brings out his hand to shoot from within there as well, in order to get a better shot in. And seemingly, he's protected in this whole area. This makes him a lot more mobile, especially since he can't walk. He can go through different places, and it makes it easier for him to find his targets. Plus, it's safe for Johnny in that whole infinite space, so he can literally just stay in there to wait for his opportunity, and then make the shot. It's a really cool idea of a stand ability, and even then he can still use the spin holes to move up somewhere, and then he can move his own limbs through those spin holes to get a better vantage point. But then the stand user manages to get the rest of the corpse that he managed to assemble and get it out of the cathedral. But Johnny manages to create a hole in the wall from his one shot, reaches his hand out and grabs the corpse from within the infinity hole and tries to bring it in. Seeing that by doing so, he can actually destroy it, breaking the bone and everything by bringing it inside that infinity. So basically, seemingly everything besides Johnny can actually get torn to shreds. I also want to touch on how Gyro looks at Johnny and sees that the looks in his eye, and I like the little image of like the flare in his eyes, like the dark flare in his pupils, showing that he has the intent to kill. No hesitation, no taking prisoners. He is ready. He's not wavering anymore. He even says so himself. This is kind of concerning, because it does seem like if Johnny gets into this mindset, he's only focused on the kill, like a predator chasing its prey, without any regard to anything else. And then the stand user actually does something smart, but ends up biting him in the ass later, by letting his arm get pulled into the infinity and having it ripped off, so he could have the chance to stab Johnny in the neck. He does it. He manages to stab Johnny and seemingly kills him. But his stand is still in effect, making it so that Johnny says, yeah, the victory's mine, because by the rules of his own stand, if you kill with murderous intent, with the whole how this whole stand ability works, Johnny got revived by the stand, brought back to life completely, and now all the sins that got transferred over to Johnny are transferred back to the stand user. So now he's a victim of his own stand. So now all the ghosts from his past, along with whatever Johnny has, is attacking him. So yeah, victory's theirs. He tries to throw a hatchet to try and kill Johnny, but he's then shot in the neck from behind, which was later revealed to be Valentine. like I stated earlier, at the beginning of this arc, he managed to deduce where Johnny and Gyro were heading. He sent his stand user there, but just in case, he ended up following him and waited in the wings in order to grab the corpse from the stand user and even get rid of his own loose end, stating that what he did was primarily, in the eyes of the Civil War stand, he saved Johnny's life from a murderer, which means he won't get the sins transferred to him and his stand won't affect them. So yeah, he ends up taking the corpse and runs away, ending the arc with something bittersweet. They managed to beat the stand user, but now they kind of lost the corpse in the process. Moving on, I like how after they finish the current stage of the race, which is the 7th stage, they're immediately pursued by assassins sent by Valentine. And I just like how they both just nonchalantly use their abilities to just wipe out these assailants without any trouble at all, like they were just fodder. I mean, based off of all the shit they went through in this whole race, it makes sense. These basic assassins are not going to do anything to them. So yeah, all they really have left to go on, and they discuss this, is that they have to find Dio. He has the last remaining corpse part outside of Lucy with the eye, so they only have 2 options. And the most real option they can do right now is to find Dio and get the eye, defeat him, and make it up the rankings. Dio is their only hope right now, so yeah, that makes a hell of a lot of sense. We then shift focus to Stefan, who basically is confused as he realized that the corpse they found wasn't Lucy, but it looks exactly like her. And he then comes to the conclusion that maybe Lucy and Scarlet swapped places somehow, and he can realize it, but he just doesn't know how it's possible. Then Magenta shows up, and he shoots Stefan, as he honestly overheard the conversation Gyro had with Wikipedia about Lucy being the one that is kind of messing with the president, and Wikipedia just so happens to try and go and find Stefan Steele to try and find Lucy and protect them. You find Stefan shot, and he ends up having a confrontation with Magenta. And I like how this whole confrontation is basically just one big stalemate. And basically Dio was eavesdropping this entire time. So now, in that whole confrontation, he knows that Lucy is the one in the president's midst and is the traitor, so he has that piece of information. I'm not going to get too into this whole fight because Wikipedia does end up winning in the end and kind of outsmarts Magenta. Magenta sets it up so he has his stand active, he can't deal any damage, and he can't move from his one spot. And they're being pursued by guards and soldiers, so it's a desperate situation. But Wikipedia manages to use the power of spin to make Stefan survive a crash that he causes for the carriage, which ends up throwing Magenta into the ocean, and he's stuck that way. He can't get out of the water because, due to his stand, if he keeps it active, he won't drown to death. He won't be able to breathe, but he won't drown to death. He'll just stay in a constant state like that for as long as he can, because he can't move or do anything in that whole instance. He's invincible for that one whole moment in time, stating, Dio's gonna find me. Dio's gonna find me. And yeah, Dio was the one that saved Magenta from freezing to death, and basically made Magenta his underling. It's nice that this is a different version of Dio, but he still has enough charisma to sway people to his side, especially someone as gullible and, let's just say, moronic as Magenta. And literally, Magenta's whole ending is that he never deactivated his stand, he got swept away by the water, and I presume he just died of old age or something, or he couldn't hold a stand for any longer and he ended up drowning. But yeah, that all happened, and we also get Lucy talking to Valentine. Her cover almost being blown as the eye that she had was pulled over towards the corpse. We get her backstory and how Stefan married her, and apparently it was all because he saved her from the Mafia. Lucy gave Stefan the idea for the Steel Ball Run race, basically saved his life through a bit of inspiration when she was a child, and he wanted to repay that favor however he could. But when he found her family home, she was sold off to the Mafia because the Mafia was gonna take everything from her family and her father had no choice. So Stefan did something that honestly, all it really did was just lie to the Mafia, saying that she was quote unquote damaged goods and that he was supposed to marry Lucy. By doing that, he saved her from the Mafia and ended up saving her family's farm. Stefan even says, this whole marriage thing, it's just on paper. Grow up, find a boyfriend, find another husband, do whatever you have, live a normal life. But for right now, you are safe here. Go to school, have a normal life, do whatever you can, live your life as you may. I'm not going to lay a finger on you, which I find really nice, due to the fact that I did not want to touch on this in part 1, but I considered it kind of creepy because Lucy is 14 years old and Stefan is in his mid-50s, I think. But at least this relationship is literally just on paper. They're married. In private, they're more or less like an actual like father-daughter figure, like an actual found family, and they can find each other. Still kind of weird though, but you know what? I'm gonna leave it as it lies. It's not as bad as I thought it was gonna end up being. So I'm happy for that. Still think it's kind of weird that he had to do that, but in the context of the story, it makes sense. So I'm gonna leave it as it lies. I feel like this whole section of the story is gonna be like very in depth, so I'm not gonna get too far into it. All I can tell you is that Valentine's analogy about the person that takes the napkin first is honestly pretty relevant even now, because it kind of shows how it's actually like a way to talk about how trends are made by the first person starting something and then other people following. It's a whole like the first person to take action ends up having everyone else follow after them. I feel like it's a lot deeper and more philosophical than I'm making it out to be, and I'm pretty sure it is. So like I said, I'm not going to do this whole analogy justice, but it helps give us more of a peek into Valentine's mentality, showing that the reason he's doing this is because he wants to do something first so people can follow him, and he wants to do this all for the betterment of his own country. He then proceeds to try and force himself on Lucy. Oh man, I'm not going to cover this portion. All we have to know is Lucy stabs Valentine in the neck and tries to run away. Valentine ends up falling on a chair, disappears, which we get a brief glimpse of his stand ability, and he tries to look after Lucy, try and find her, and she then goes into the room where he's coincidentally hiding the corpse. She then comes in contact with it, and she then literally gets shone on by bright light. As, something happens. She is now, I'm not going to show this scene because I feel like YouTube would demonetize it. It seems that she is pregnant. The corpse has merged with her, and now the head is in her stomach, and she's becoming one with the corpse now. The old JoJo's Bizarre Adventure wouldn't be JoJo's Bizarre Adventure if it didn't have weird shit half the time. I love JoJo's. It just sometimes the weird stuff that happens, I'm like, I should not apply actual logic to some of this stuff going on, especially when we're talking about a story where the MacGuffin is literally finding the body of Jesus Christ. Now on to some more lighthearted stuff. I honestly really quickly want to just commend Araki for chapter 63. Because this was when JoJo's was monthly. JoJo's is now monthly, and chapter 63 is like 7 pages. Unheard of. And this whole thing does not progress the story at all. It's literally just a bit where Gyro tells a story, it just tells a whole bad joke to Johnny. And I laughed at this, not because of the joke itself, because of how Araki depicted Gyro in this whole joke, and how it was delivered. So I just found it hilarious, and I feel like if it's given animation and voice acting, it'll just make everyone else laugh. And I gotta commend the guy for just taking 1 week just to make it so that literally a whole joke is 1 chapter, 4 pages, and I find it hilarious. JoJo fans that have seemingly read at that point, if you were actually able to read the series monthly somehow, tell me, how did you feel when you found out that chapter 63 was not advancing the actual plot, but was just Gyro and Johnny discussing another weird joke that somehow made you laugh? At least I assume it made you laugh. Anyway, moving on. Who shot Johnny Joestar? This whole section encompasses the Chocolate Disco fight with Gyro, and Dio and Wicked People versus Valentine. So I'm just going to gloss over this really quickly. Gyro ends up confronting a stand user, and Johnny is seemingly shot from behind. And we see Valentine show up behind Gyro. And the whole confrontation is very bizarre because when Johnny notices Valentine, Johnny is shot. And the person who shot him has remained a mystery for a numerous amount of chapters. Gyro manages to actually defeat Chocolate Disco. I don't want to get too into the fight itself. All you gotta know is that he managed to do something with perspective. So Gyro manages to get out of there by making a lens of like dust and air, so it wouldn't affect him. So yeah, he actually manages to outsmart the enemy and take him down. This fight could be a whole video in and of itself, and this video is already getting long enough as it is. Johnny, after getting shot, managed to escape by using Act 3 to get into a drainage pipe and going into the infinity. Next, we have the last portion of the manga, which is the D4C arc. And oh boy, was this whole start a big mindfuck. I loved it. It was a nice whodunit, and I was curious to see how it worked, but I honestly feel like this ends up getting retconned to an extent later down the road, and I'll get into that in a second. So we get 2 instant flashbacks of what's happening, as we have 3 different people with perspectives on who shot Johnny. 2 children, 2 twins, and an old painter showing that the shooters were either Wikapipo, Dio, or Valentine. And we get 2 instances of flashing back in time after Wikapipo and Dio confront each other. Before that, we get a flashback to Jesus resurrecting from the dead and going across the world to where he died in North America once more, and his body parts scattered, also leaving the map to Joseph. Now, like I said, this whole thing is a mindfuck because Wikapipo is going after Dio to try and find Lucy and try and protect her. And this whole ends up leading up to seemingly Valentine appearing from behind the American flag and trying to kill Wikapipo, but then Wikapipo manages to shoot him, but it's revealed that he ends up shooting Johnny somehow. We then cut back to Dio's whole interpretation of events as he infiltrated the president's house, became a guard to try and assassinate him, and only to realize something's going on with Lucy, and he follows Valentine. He ends up encountering Wikapipo, who tries to shoot him. He jumps on Wikapipo with his dinosaur powers, goes onto the flag, picks up a gun, and then shoots, revealing that the person he actually shot was somehow Johnny. They then follow and then are confronted by Valentine as his powers are weird. Confusing, because it seems like with the analogy that we get, he kind of like puts realities to exist at the exact same time. So everything we just saw were different realities of where Dio shot Johnny, Wikapipo shot Johnny, and Valentine shot Johnny, which ends up being the actual one. But this whole confrontation ends up being weird because we see Valentine like not getting hit with any of the attacks, where whenever he gets hit, he ends up having a hole where the wound is, as if it was transferred somewhere else. And then we get the reveal of his stand name, Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, or D4C, which is what it's been called for the rest of the arc for the most part. And I kind of like that it makes things go a lot quicker. Dio and Wikapipo continue to fight him, and then we literally get to see more of how his stand ability works. Again, this video is already being long enough, I'm not going to go super in depth into this fight. But basically, if he's put in between 2 objects, he literally goes to a whole other dimension where things are very similar to how they are. And if 2 versions of the same person encounter each other, they collide and annihilate each other, erasing them from both worlds. And only Valentine seemingly can travel between them without any of the negative repercussions. He takes advantage of this, leaves Dio stranded in one reality where him and his other self are about to die, and he takes the eyeball with him. But then, Dio actually managed to do some 4D chess because as they were confronting Valentine, he actually sent dinosaurs down the drainage pipe and managed to bring Johnny to their location. Johnny manages to get a shot in on Valentine, but Valentine manages to get away before the killing blow, as it's revealed that he got in between the door and he swapped places with another version of himself. At first I thought it was just, healing, but it seems like he can actually swap versions of himself, which is honestly a really cool way for a villain to avoid death. Dio then plays Wikapipo to try and get Wikapipo to pull him out of the flag, but then Dio manages to trick him, and literally, instead of just pulling himself out, he pulls Wikapipo's opposite side inside the flag, and they both annihilate each other. So now Dio is off to try and take down the president and get the corpse for himself, as he believes he has a way to take down the president. Meanwhile, we get Lucy managing to escape with Stefan and develop her own type of stand ability for a short period of time, and she tries to escape the clutches of Valentine and his subordinates, with a voice in her head telling her where to go, which is later revealed to be Valentine, who was secretly manipulating her, as he actually had the 2 eyes from the corpse showing where Lucy was, and he was able to talk into her head as the corpses connected to each other. Johnny and Gyro reunite as they now go to try and follow Dio in order to find Valentine and fight him. Although Johnny is just like, I can't do this. He's got the corpse, he's got an incredibly invincible ability, there's no way for us to do this. Gyro reassures him and even tells him of a new way to enhance spin with how the stirrups on a horse are made, and can actually advance the power of spin even more if you manage to utilize the power of the horse's own rotation and stuff like that, enhancing the golden ratio even more. So with So their confidence reassured, they go off to try and take down Valentine. And I like how Lucy tries to leave a message, but through sheer coincidence and fate, her message makes it to Dio and Hot Pants. So now they know their location and they end up trying to follow the Valentine and Lucy. When Valentine notices this, he actually does a really smart plan. He goes to another world, pulls the other versions of Dio and Hot Pants, who are pursuing his doppelganger, pulls them into this world, and sets it up in a situation where they're probably going to encounter each other. They almost collide and hurt themselves and get themselves annihilated, but Dio manages to outsmart him and get onto the train. And now while all this is going on, Lucy's body is beginning to fully assimilate with the corpse, and she continues to change. And I like how Dio manages to find a decent way to get around this ability, as he literally has Hot Pants lure their doppelgangers onto the train, as he then closes the door from where they were brought into their own world from, and sends them back. Since that was the last place that Valentine uses the ability, Dio deduced that if he just does that to the counterparts, bam, they could end up being sent back. And all he's got to do in order to take down Valentine is to make it an instant death. And all I gotta say is, the fight between Dio and Valentine is honestly really, really awesome. Hot Pants does her best, but is knocked away. Let me tell you, this fight is really, really brutal, because literally the whole reason Valentine manages to survive the first encounter with Dio one-on-one is out of sheer luck. Being so close to Lucy and the corpse merging with her, he manages to just barely get away, and is even able to bring in counterparts to him to confuse Dio and take him down. Hot Pants doesn't quit thinking to get Valentine to just pause for a second and hesitate by turning Dio into another version of Valentine during the scuffle. Dio manages to kill 2 alternate versions of Valentine, and then proceeds to attack Valentine and give him some more fatal wounds. They both jump out of the train through the window, as Dio then manages to get a fatal blow on Valentine. And we see it. He is basically almost dead. But in that one split second right before he is dead, he manages to get between the ground and the train. And Dio is even dragged into the train as well, as Dio is dead. From that fall and through seemingly the ability of D4C, Dio somehow managed to get underneath the train, and he was basically run over and cut in half, dying instantly. And thus Valentine's stand ends up moving to an alternate version of himself, and that new version becomes the main Valentine. And I like the piece of information that the base world that is in there is actually where the corpse is. I feel like this is a retcon because a whole confusing thing happens. I'm not going to get into it, but let's just say the whole converging different realities all at once just gets thrown out the window just for Valentine to just go to different worlds by getting between 2 objects, him and other people. And honestly, by being so close to the corpse, the power of D4C ends up evolving even more. Because now, Valentine can literally draw upon this big beam of light, this whole line of light, and is engulfed in it. Now I assume this is because the corpse is resonating with D4C, since they're very close to each other, and I guess as the corpse is changing Lucy and everything, it's enhancing D4C since it's being the closest stand user next to it, so that's what's making D4C so strong. In essence, D4C's new ability is that as he's in this ray of light, any attack that goes towards him ends up transferring any and all damage to someone else in the world. Thus, Valentine is able to just avoid any and all misfortune. Now, I'm not going to get too into the fight between Johnny and Gyro against Valentine, because it's basically for like a whole almost 10 chapters, like 11 chapters. So I'm not going to get too into it. But let's just say Johnny and Gyro manages to fight D4C for a good while before Johnny ends up losing an arm, and Gyro manages to get knocked off his horse. But by doing so, they realize they can actually hurt him through the power of spin. And through the golden ratio, they could actually injure him. Valentine confronts the 2 of them, and they continue to fight. Johnny almost has the perfect rotation, but like I said, Johnny loses his arm and is knocked off. Gyro manages to narrowly avoid getting killed by Valentine because Stefan manages to regain consciousness, and the light from D4C is pulled away. He's losing his invincibility because Stefan manages to get Lucy out of there. Gyro then takes Lucy and gets as far away from Valentine as possible for their next confrontation. And it's revealed that in their last attack, Valentine didn't even notice. Gyro, with the power spin, got rid of his freaking ear, which is really cool. Gyro and Valentine have one last standoff where Valentine is basically dominating the fight for the most part until he realizes what's going on, and he goes after Gyro's horse. Gyro manages to use, for a brief instance, the perfect rotation, and I have to say, utilizing the power of spin and awakening his own stand ball breaker is really cool, because through the power of infinity, he broke through this golden light and managed to injure Valentine, even getting him to age. And this continues on. He even manages to outwit Valentine for a good portion of it, but it's revealed that Valentine wasn't instantly killed because the spear he used wasn't a perfect spear. Before reaching the power of infinity, Gyro's steel ball that was used was nicked, so it lessened the power from his ball breaker stand. Thus, at the very last instance, Gyro ends up dying by Valentine, as the wounds catch up with him, leaving Johnny the only one standing against Valentine, with one of the last words for Gyro to say to Johnny is Lesson 5 of the Zeppeli way of spin. The shortest route was a detour. It was a detour that was our shortest route. And honestly, it actually ends up being code for Johnny to manage to unlock the perfect rotation. Johnny literally ends up having a panic attack, not knowing what he could do. He tries to get Lucy, but he's unable to. He tries to shoot Valentine, but each time he does, the damage is transferred somewhere else in the world. And Valentine goes for Johnny's horse, injuring it to the point where it can't get up. And as Johnny is thinking, he realizes he still has the steel ball that was left behind previously by Gyro when he used his last attack on Valentine before getting away with Lucy. And he uses that steel ball with spin to have his horse kick him into the air, utilizing that rotation and achieving the perfect golden ratio, advancing Tusk to Act 4. And this thing is insanely cool, and I love it. Johnny then fires off a nail bullet at Valentine, managing to actually break in through the infinity. We see Tusk opening up the golden ray of light where Valentine is seemingly invincible. The power of infinity that Johnny's stand has thanks to spin, the gravity it has, is able to break into the safe space, and he then manages to injure Valentine with an aura rush, which is a really awesome beatdown. He then pummels Valentine into a hole, as the hole then begins to bury him alive. But thanks to that, he manages to get in between two objects, and he transfers over to another world, causing himself to change. But all of a sudden, Valentine, the new Valentine, ends up spinning, unraveling, and is dragged back into the hole that he was placed in to begin with and gets buried again. And we see that this whole thing, the whole rotation, is an infinite rotation. It follows to death, basically. Act 4 literally makes it so that anyone that's hit by its bullet will spin indefinitely until they die. And Valentine keeps trying to go to world to world to world to outlast the infinite's rotation until eventually he comes back to that world. And we get a bit of his backstory, showing how he got his idea of patriotism from his father dying to protect his country, which is a noble thing, but it twists his perception of patriotism and everything. The man's charismatic, but he's done a lot of messed up shit because his whole idea is America first. He wants to protect everyone in the country, but he's a hypocrite. He's a massive hypocrite because he's killed so many of his own citizens and has spent a bunch of the country's money on a race to theoretically find the corpse of Jesus Christ for infinite power. The man is a crazy person, but this is JoJo's, and the guy, he's so charismatic he manages to get it done. And all because he managed to find the heart after narrowly dying in a devil's palm. And I like how he tries to bargain with Johnny for his life, because the only way to stop that infinite rotation is with another bullet of infinite rotation, but spinning the opposite way. Honestly, despite the process of getting the infinite rotation kind of complex, it's a relatively simple solution. But I really like how Valentine is trying to bargain here, stating that I am the good guy, and it almost convinces Johnny, and he even throws in, I will bring a gyro from another world here to replace your gyro. It won't be exactly the same, but Gyro will be alive in this world and will follow the same path. Johnny then throws an empty gun at him as a test, which Valentine, since he already had a gun, kind of fails the test, and Johnny shoots him again, and Valentine ends up dying by getting buried underneath the hole. In this whole interaction, Johnny is on his knees, not on the ground or flat on the ground, he is on his knees. His legs are working again. Thanks to the infinite rotation and his stand-evolving, he starts to stand again, and after this confrontation, he starts to stand and walk. he's basically fully healed now. And Johnny is getting ready to basically finish the race and get the corpse somewhere safe. Until the corpse disappears. And they don't know why, and he's panicking. So he tries to follow the horse prints and follow along the race because Steele tells Johnny about a safe house that the president has that he was going to store the corpse in on Manhattan. And that's probably where whoever took the corpses is going. And the whole mystery is, who is this mysterious person? Because they came in, stole the corpse without anybody realizing it, leaving no trace behind besides some horse prints that look familiar. And as Johnny is making his way towards the 9th stage of the race, he encounters this person. To be Dio. But not our Dio in Part 7. An alternate version of Dio that's also going through a Steel Ball Run race that was recruited by the president and was sweet-talked by the president. And this version of Dio has the world. I fanboyed from this. I'm like, I said this back when Dio got his dinosaur stand. I'm like, I kind of expected Dio to get like another version of the world or something like that. And we got it in this final part. And this whole fight is literally just an homage for the most part to Dio versus Jotaro from Part 3, and I loved it. And also Jonathan from Part 1 fighting against Dio from Part 1 as well. Only difference is that this Dio wasn't an immortal vampire. And I like how Valentine gave Dio inside information on Johnny's stand. With how the infinite rotation works, Dio tries to use stop time to get one up over on Johnny, and Johnny multiple times just barely manages to get away from it and adapt to all this. Even realizing that Tusk Act 4 with the infinite rotation can actually move in stopped time. Another Part 3 reference that I liked. Showing that it's not just causality, but it's also just time in general is something that Tusk can move in. And in the end, it all comes down to Dio using stop time to go for Johnny's horse, gnawing him down, and letting Johnny fire off a bullet. Realizing that if it misses, it'll probably return to the actual target, and once it hits Dio's leg, Dio chops up his own leg, tosses it at Johnny, and the infinite rotation goes to Johnny. And Johnny loses to Dio. Johnny is stuck unraveling endlessly. Then Dio manages to get to the safe house in Manhattan to store the corpse in, where Lucy thankfully managed to deduce that it's probably Dio that came out of the hole. Lucy managed to somehow deduce that it was Dio, and she found Dio's corpse and everything, confronted Dio at Manhattan Island, and uses the lingering abilities of D4C to have these two alternate versions meet, collide, and kill each other off. So yeah, Dio dies because he encounters his other self. It's funny how the main character, Johnny, isn't the one that beats Dio in the end. It was Lucy, a character that was just like basically like a spy for the most part and was a damsel in distress towards the latter half. It's nice that she got a way to actually come up on top on the villain. I understand why Dio was the final fight to an extent, a nice big homage for this new universe, and it was being built up for this entire series that Johnny and Dio were going to actually fight, but we never really got that final confrontation between the two. So it's nice that we got it here, and Johnny managed to stop the infinite rotation on himself thanks to Seven's intervention. Johnny doesn't win the Steel Ball Run race, but Poco Loco does. Honestly, I'm kind of peeved on that because we didn't get to see much of Poco Loco. I'm alright with him basically winning the race in the end because Dio was disqualified for not showing up and just disappearing. I just wish we saw more of Poco Loco because he only saw him a handful of times. He barely had any speaking lines, and his stand only popped up like 3 times throughout this whole thing, and it's just implied that he has just insane luck. How he managed to win the race in general. I was honestly kind of hoping that Poco Loco would actually do something in the final fight, but no, he was just there to win the race. And that's honestly kind of a shame. I thought it was really funny, and I thought he would add to a nice dynamic to the Joe gang. But what do I think of Steel Ball Run as a whole? I know I kind of like rushed into this last portion of the story, but I feel like this could be like videos in and of themselves. But Steel Ball Run, honestly the best JoJo part so far. I understand now why everyone says that Steel Ball Run is the best part in JoJo's, and I look forward to making videos on Part 7 also from time to time as well. I'm going to start Part 8 immediately after. I actually already started Part 8. I might make Part 8 a 3-part video similar to Steel Ball Run, just not in the way I did it just now because of poor planning. But I look forward to doing more JoJo's content. Steel Ball Run is honestly the best experience ever I've had with JoJo's. I want to go back and reread it, and I can't wait for when it inevitably gets an anime adaptation. JoJo's is one of my favorite series of all time. I love Johnny's development from being a kind of like selfish, morally gray character for the most part, being more selfless towards the end. He's still kind of morally gray, but he's more heroic towards the end, and he's very self-confident, and he ends up progressing as a character. And it's just a nice straight through character arc. And Gyro, even though he died at the end, was a great character, and I liked that he was a mentor to Johnny, helping him get his confidence and to grow throughout the part. All in all, I enjoyed Part 7. I made that abundantly clear, and I cannot wait to review Part 8. What did you guys think of Part 7? What do you guys think of these reviews that I've done with Steel Ball Run? I'm sorry that I kind of rushed the ending of this Soul thing, but I didn't want to linger on it too much and make this video 2 hours long. With all that said and done, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell for updates on future videos. It really does help. And it shows you guys like JoJos, and I want to do more JoJo stuff on the channel from here on out. With all that said and done, I hope you all have an awesome day.